Spoiler warning, if you haven't seen King of the Hill Season 14 yet, definitely go and check it out on Hulu before coming to watch this video, because it's basically a King of the Hill spoiler review. So go and check it out before you come here. Alright, let's get into the video. King of the Hill is back, baby, after over 15 years since the Season 13 finale aired on the Fox network. We are finally gifted with Season 14 now airing on Hulu. And Hank Hill and the gang are back in Harlem to give us some new adventures in King of the Hill. And I'm just gonna say this up front, King of the Hill is probably one of the best revival slash reboot slash sequel series slash anything else in that category that we have gotten in modern age. And I feel like as though my judging team have done a really great job bringing this show back and bringing it to life. So for those of you who do not know the plot yet of Season 14, it's basically set in a time skip. So it's not set back in 2009 Harlem slash USA. It's basically set 15 years after the events of the 13th season. And in the time between the 13th season and 14th season, Hank and Peggy moved to Saudi Arabia, where Hank got a job, and he has returned to Texas to basically retire. And it kind of shocks them to see how much Texas has changed in those years. And so Hank, who, you know, is kind of deep-rooted in his beliefs and kind of is, you know, unwilling to change or shift in his beliefs, now has to adapt to the new culture that America is in. And it feels like an awesome meta commentary for what the real world is. It's like, do you stay firm in your beliefs, or do you shift it to adapt to what the world is? Because we've seen Hank, and we're still seeing him in this way where he's like kind of, he doesn't want to move from them. You know what I mean? It's like he's that character that's unchanging. But one really cool thing about Hank's character in the show now is that for as much as he's unchanging, we're seeing moments of him where he's basically also changed. So for as much as he's been in Saudi and the US has changed, him being in Saudi Arabia has also caused a shift in him. And we see this actually in one episode where somehow now he's actually a fan of soccer, or, you know, as the rest of the world calls it, football. And, you know, all his friends kind of believe this kind of thing that has come up. And so now it's like Hank's really trying to, originally he was trying to suppress himself over these changes, and then he comes to accept it. And in a similar fashion, we actually see, you know, Hank has a strong love for propane. And in the second episode, I think, Bobby gets grilled. He can't even accept the fact for the first part of the episode where Bobby is not using propane in his shop, which is really wild. And we'll get to Bobby in a bit, because I think that he's probably one of the best things about this season. Because one really cool thing about doing the time skip is that now we have all the children characters. So we have Bobby, we have Joseph, we have Connie. Now that they are grown up, they are in their early 20s, basically. And Bobby, as you know, as this naive, very nice child, now has turned into this guy who's kind of mellowed out. His personality definitely shifted, but it's more mature. But you can still get the sense that it's Bobby. You know what I mean? It's like, he's still a really fun character to watch. And I think, honestly, it's really rewarding that we have seen now that he's basically grown up. And the kind of adventures that we get with this new Bobby is pretty interesting, as he makes more of these adult decisions, while at the same time, you know, we get some parts of his nature come out. So there's this one episode where he basically is buying a car, and this car salesman kind of tricks him into taking a horse, and now he's struggling with the horse until John Redcorn takes it off of his hands. And to see these new dynamics with these characters as well, I'll start with the kids first because we were just on that. But to see how Connie re-enters his life in a way, and to see them re-progress in a sort of way, it's a really interesting take on their friendship dynamic compared to the previous seasons. And I feel like as though there's a certain part of them that they are going to end up together. That's not a fact, that's just my speculation. But come on, it should happen. They should end up together, even though Connie's dating like the character who's basically has a partial share in the owner of the restaurant. And it's also cool to see him living on his own. You know, he's with Joseph, rooming in the they're both roommates basically. And then when you get to the other characters, it's interesting. It's interesting to say the least. I mean, Dale's still Dale, and Boomhauer's still Boomhauer, and Bill is still crushing on Peggy. In fact, one of the episodes, they really make it to where Bill lies about his life and gives stories about Hank to this group that he's met in the intervening years. That, you know, Hank basically has Bill's personality traits, and he takes on what Hank is. And I think that's just a really fun way to go about that episode. One thing that I'll say that I really love about the series is that now that it's back, it feels like as though it's a better meta commentary on today's society compared to a lot of what what adult animation is basically like. So we have like South Park, and we have Family Guy, and we have The Simpsons, and we all know that they do some level of commentary on the current day. In fact, as of recording this, we already know that South Park is doing the whole Trump thing, and that's, well, it is what it is. I'm not political in that aspect, but it's good that in the wake of more of these, you know, humorous and outlandish shows, that we get something more grounded in reality for what's going on. So, for instance, you know, they do reference the pandemic. They do reference a lot of the stuff that takes place in the real world. And it's really cool to have characters who are basically living in the world that we live in, minus a few certain things that are going on. And I feel like as though it's a nice change of pace. It's a nice change of pace to have King the Hill back on TV compared to what we've had before. It's a nice change of pace that in the wake of all these pretty bizarre shows, and I'm not pouncing on them, I'm not ridiculing them, but it feels nice. It feels nice to have something like this back on TV again. And one other thing that I don't know if any other person has noticed, but if you go and binge the series, there is sort of like a serialized ish storyline. So it's kind of like, for instance, at the beginning of the season, we see not only the Hills return back to Texas, but we also see Bobby meet Connie again. And then later on, they run into each other again, Bobby and Connie. And we get this whole overarching thing where they're friends again. That's one thing I could think of off the top of my head. But it also drives home the fact that for, as Hank's character is, it's nice to see something where it's basically like Hank trying to figure out everything in this new world, because even in how it is with, you know, coming back to Texas, and as I said, the unchanging views, he's also struggling a bit with this prospect of retirement. And we see it time and time again in various episodes where he's trying to do stuff and he's trying to figure everything out. And the same thing could be said about Peggy. Honestly, I don't have much of an opinion on Peggy apart from one episode so far. where she sets up like this library or something, this little book nook. If you all don't know what those are, people just basically have like bookstores outside their house, and you know, buying the books from another neighbor, it turns out they have bed bugs. I personally think the show is hitting all the right notes. It still has the stuff that makes King of the Hill King of the Hill, and on top of that, it's still fun to see a lot of the people come back to the show, and we get, even in these opening, in this new season, we're still getting to see other characters who even make smaller appearances. Unfortunately, Luann's not in the series yet. She may be. Hopefully, we get to see at least some version of her in the 15th season. It's been confirmed that there's been a season 15 now. But it's cool to see that Good Hank is making a return. It's cool to see that Khan made a return and that he basically gets divorced. Yeah, that's funny. That's funny. And all the other characters, basically, I think it's a good time all around. I still think though that there's a few loose ends to tie up based on this time skip. It would be nice to see Strickland reappear, and we come to realize, how did Hank end up in Saudi Arabia? It's never established outside of him getting a job there and moving for that job. Honestly, I would love to see more backstories. It's cool that in the soccer episode, we got a little bit of a story about how Hank came to like football. But there's a lot more that I cannot wait to see with the show. It's good. It's one of my top 10s, and it's cool to see that a show that I've loved is back on TV. Well, streaming, anyway. But guys, let me know what y'all think of King of the Hill Season 14 down in the comments below. It was so awesome to be able to discuss it with y'all. I want to be able to continue to move into discussion videos. And so if you all have any commentary on how I'm doing with these, leave it down in the comments. Your critiques, your constructive criticism would be much appreciated. But until then, I will see y'all in the next one.